I was mid-review on a merger file when my phone buzzed with a text from my wife. I think maybe we need to break up. 5 years of marriage reduced to a throwaway line, the same casual tone she'd use when deciding what to cook for dinner, and I stared at those words for exactly 30 seconds before replying, I agree. Your stuff will be on your porch in an hour. The typing dots blinked, vanished, blinked again, and then her reply arrived in a frantic tumble. Wait, I was joking. WTF, Ethan. Call me. But I wasn't joking, and I wasn't calling. Not because I didn't care, but because that offhand line had just tripped a plan I'd been assembling for weeks. I closed the merger document and crossed to our bedroom. Brooke's clothes hung in neat chromatic order. She'd always been meticulous about how she presented herself. I began stripping hangers with methodical hands. Dresses, blouses, those ludicrously expensive shoes she'd insisted were investments. Everything folded into trash bags with the same disciplined care I used to organize discovery exhibits. My phone erupted. Brooke calling, texting, calling again. I let it ring. She said she was working late yet again. I almost believed that until I remembered she'd used the same excuse 6 nights straight. Either she'd unlocked a secret to perpetual overtime, or she'd found someone else worth lying about it for. Given her record in high school chemistry, my money was on the latter. The private investigator I'd engaged 3 weeks earlier had already turned suspicion into proof. Pictures of Brooke entering the Palmer House Hotel with a man I learned was Garrett Whitfield. Garrett Whitfield, the name itself sounded like an exclusive club that still kept doors closed to certain people. CEO of Whitfield Luxury Properties, married to former federal prosecutor Sloan Whitfield, and apparently in the habit of collecting other people's wives. I hauled the bags to the front porch just as Brooke's BMW cut onto our Lincoln Park Drive. She exploded from the car like it was a flame, hair perfectly styled, face a mask of outrage. Ethan, what the hell? She cried, staring at the bundles and then at me on the threshold. I was kidding, she insisted. You were kidding when you were with your boss last Tuesday, or just when you texted me. Her expression ran an Oscar-worthy gamut: surprise, denial, anger, fear, and when I pulled my phone to show her the first photo from Daniel Reed, she finally faltered. Brooke and Garrett deep in conversation at Gibson Steakhouse, her hand resting on his forearm, his gaze fixed on her mouth. Daniel is thorough, I said. Former Chicago PD, now freelance, excellent at documentation. You had me followed? She demanded, but I had my confirmation. She tried to push past me and into the house. I stepped in front of her. This is my house too, she spat. Actually, check the deed, I replied. I bought this place before we were married. Illinois counts premarital property. The color bled from her cheeks. She'd always left the paperwork to me. Another careless oversight in a long list. You can't just kick me out, she pleaded. I can, and I am, I said. You have 30 days to get your affairs in order. Illinois law gives you that window. My phone chimed with an unknown number that I already suspected. Hello, this is Garrett Whitfield, the voice said. I think we need to talk. Brooke lunged for the phone. I held back. Mr. Whitfield, I wondered when you'd call, I said. You're making a mistake, he answered, trying to smooth it over. You're right, I replied. It doesn't have to get ugly. Then met Brooke's pleading eyes and finished. It will be absolutely devastating instead. I hung up and closed the door on her protests and on whatever future she'd imagined. The law had taught me to let emotion go. Fury makes you reckless, pain makes you blind, but cold calculation makes you dangerous. I'd felt suspicions for months before hiring Daniel. Brooke's late nights and new wardrobe, the phone perms and furtive showers, the gradual shutting of doors, they were small signals that someone paying attention would notice. My work was built on that attention. Spotting clauses that could sink multi-million-dollar deals, pulling apart narratives until the contradictions bled out. The late night started in March, she said. Big project, Whitfield expanding into the Gold Coast, plausible enough on the surface. Then came the purchases beyond her salary, the locked phone, the way she seemed to try to scrub herself clean when she got home. Daniel's report compiled the rest. Hotel charges on Garrett's corporate card. Palmer House lobby footage showing them entering together at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when she claimed property tours in Evanston. Phone logs with hour-long calls in the small hours. The photograph that sealed the case, Daniel said, was last Friday. Brooke and Garrett in the back of his Bentley behind a North Shore warehouse, activity visible even through tinted glass, captured with a telephoto lens that left nothing to interpretation. I spread Daniel's photos across the dining table like exhibits, each labeled with date, time, and location. Another text from Brooke arrived. Please let me explain. It's not what you think. I almost laughed. It sounded exactly like what I thought. The only surprise was how stereotypical it all was. Ambitious woman, older boss, clandestine afternoons in hotel rooms. A plot Hollywood would reject as too familiar. What wasn't one note was what I intended to do about it. I spent the night digging into Garrett Whitfield with the same deep dive skills I used to advise corporate clients. Public filings, property records, court dockets. Whitfield Luxury looked formidable on paper, $500 million in revenue, premier listings, ties to the city's establishment, but under the gloss were worrying patterns. High turnover among attractive young women, 2 settled workplace complaints kept out of court, and a personal history of affairs managed by crisis PR firms. Garrett assumed his money and contacts made him untouchable. He was about to find out he was wrong. First, though, I had to be ready for Brooke's counterstrike. The next morning she showed up with coffee and croissants, wearing the blue dress I'd once adored and makeup softened to suggest vulnerability. "Can we at least talk?" she asked, setting the pastry down. 5 years of marriage deserves conversation, she said. I stayed standing and told her to begin. "This thing with Garrett, it just happened," she claimed. "It doesn't mean anything." "Which instance are you referring to?" I asked. "The office, the car, the 3 hours at the Palmer house." Her composure crumbled. "You really had me followed," she said, realizing there was a difference between suspicion and proof. Tears came next. "I love you," she whispered. "This was a mistake, a stupid mistake." "A mistake is a missed dry cleaning pickup," I told her. "This was months of choices. People make mistakes. People have affairs. It doesn't have to end everything," she insisted, and I watched her try every scripted salvation. Counseling, contrition, promises. I set the coffee down and unlocked my phone to the photo Daniel had taken Friday night. The sight whitened her face. "Does Sloane Whitfield know about your husband's extracurricular activities?" I asked. "No, she doesn't," Brooke stammered. "Rich wives with powerful fathers have resources if something comes out," I said. "You wouldn't," she asked, "about exposing him, because it would hurt innocent people." I told her that didn't absolve her. She edged close, finger brushing my arm, begging to fix things. But when my phone rang it was Daniel. "Meet me in an hour." I told Brooke the next time she wanted to speak, do it through counsel, and left her clutching coffee and pastries on the driveway. Daniel had picked a diner in Uptown, a place where luxury real estate execs wouldn't think to look, and he sat like a man who'd seen too much, coffee-stained shirt and tired eyes. "Your timing was perfect," he said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. I opened it and found pictures that changed the landscape. Garrett with a redhead barely old enough to drink, Jessica Morrison, 23, a junior associate at his firm, hand on his thigh at the Chicago Athletic Association. Daniel had more, a pattern of hiring attractive women under 25, rapid promotions for those who stayed, 7 out of 12 quitting within 6 months. The pattern was grim and deliberate. Garrett wasn't merely unfaithful. He ran a system. "Does your wife know about the others?" Daniel asked. I doubted it. She thought she was exceptional, and I felt a chill of satisfaction at that realization. Daniel leaned back and asked about my strategy. "Divorce would be straightforward with this kind of proof," he said. But that was only the start. I pulled out my research on Garrett's company. Financials with suspicious spikes, property transactions that didn't align with market logic, cash moves that should trigger federal reporting. Daniel whistled. "You think he's laundering money?" he asked. I said I thought his activities wouldn't hold up under scrutiny and that his wife, Sloane Whitfield, former federal prosecutor and daughter of appellate judge Harrison Blackwood, might not stay blind once she saw the full picture. If there's anyone who can make him pay, it's her. Daniel handed me the rest of his files and we shook on a plan. He would keep gathering the personal evidence. I would pursue the corporate trail. Driving back through Lincoln Park, I felt that focused rush that comes when a case snaps into place. This wasn't a merger to smooth over. This was a target to dismantle. I parked at the Whitfield's Gold Coast mansion, a limestone statement of inherited status, and rang the bell. A housekeeper answered, and moments later Sloane Whitfield herself emerged. Composed, exact, mid-30s, with a kind of courtroom-honed poise that made negotiation look like a simple task. I showed her the envelope, images of her husband with my wife and with Jessica Morrison. She examined everything with clinical calm, knuckles whitening as she handled the photos, then asked, "How long?" "At least 3 months with my wife," I said, "and potentially years with others." Daniel could provide the timeline. "What do you want?" she asked. "Justice," I said. "And what does justice look like to you?" She replied, returning the question. I leaned in. "Your husband believes wealth shields him. He is wrong. You have legal resources, connections, and influence he cannot access without consequence. Together we can ensure he faces the fallout." Sloane went quiet, then looked up with eyes like cold water and said she'd need to think, but she knew enough already to suspect there were federal concerns in Garrett's behavior. I left my card on her desk next to the images and felt a satisfaction I hadn't known since my wife's first text. This was no longer only about ending my marriage. It was about bringing down a man who assumed impunity. Garrett Whitfield was about to discover how mistaken he was. Sloane called at 8 the next morning and told me to meet her at Millennium Park by the Crown Fountain in an hour. She arrived in running clothes but carried none of the casualness of a jogger. She was all business. We walked away from the morning crowd to a bench by the water where she admitted she'd been willfully blind to irregularities in her husband's company, assuming aggressive tactics instead of criminality. Now she wondered how many federal laws he might have broken under her protection, and she wanted him destroyed, not merely discarded. "Is that something you can help with?" she asked. I told her I'd spent years legally dismantling people who thought they were untouchable. Sloan and I outlined a plan over the lake's hammered gold surface. She would leverage legal channels to freeze assets and trigger investigations, while I coordinated with Daniel to document every affair and business irregularity to build an airtight case. "What about the criminal?" "Leave the criminal elements to me," Sloan said, gripping my arm as we stood on the park bench. "I still have friends at the U.S. Attorney's office." "Are you doing this for justice or revenge?" she asked. "Is there a difference?" I answered. "Revenge is hot and personal. Justice is methodical and exhaustive." "Then we'll pursue justice," she agreed, nodding. "Revenge burns quick. Justice burns slow and consumes everything." I spent that afternoon at the firm pretending to work client matters while I dove into legal databases tracing Whitfield's empire, and what I uncovered was uglier than I'd feared. Property deals that made no sense, shell companies registered in Delaware with no legitimate purpose, sales to paper buyers, the textbook signs of laundering hidden inside luxury real estate. Brooke's texts began arriving. "Can we please talk? This is getting crazy." I ignored her. 20 minutes later. "Garrett says you're making threats." "Not like you." "No, but maybe it should have been." At 6, leaving the office, Garrett emerged from a black Escalade looking every bit the caricature of a rich predator. Silver hair, tailored suit, a vacation tan, flanked by 2 men who were clearly not there to schmooze. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "I think we need a face-to-face." "Plenty of witnesses here," I replied when he motioned to his SUV. He accused me of spreading lies and boasted of connections that could ruin me. I reminded him he'd already ruined me when he slept with my wife. He offered an ultimatum. "Walk away, take your wife back, drop this." When he threatened what a man with resources could do, I smiled and left them watching my retreat, letting their intimidation turn into motivation. Back home I found 17 missed calls and a voicemail of Brooke sobbing and promising to end things with Garrett if I would just forgive her. Too late. I poured a scotch and told Daniel to find everything he could on Garrett's network. Associates, partners, employees, anyone who could be a witness or provide leverage, and to assume we were under surveillance. He obliged, switching into full paranoid mode. 3 days later the first domino fell. Garrett was suspended. I was in a deposition when texts from Brooke screamed, "What did you do?" "Garrett's been suspended pending investigation." I called Sloan. She was pleased. The SEC had opened inquiries after anonymous tips about irregularities. Former employees were talking when offered immunity and protection. I felt the plan coalesce. Divorce papers were on their way. I would move to freeze assets, and the U.S. Attorney's Office was taking a keen interest in possible money laundering patterns. Driving through Lincoln Park, I thought about how little it takes to dismantle an empire when pressure hits the right weak points. Brooke met me on the driveway, disheveled and tear-streaked, accusing me of destroying innocent lives. "Over what?" I asked. "Over multiple affairs with very young women and massive financial crimes." I had shown his wife the proof. Sloan had been very interested. My phone buzzed. Daniel said Garrett had left the police station with lawyers but wasn't arrested. Not yet. One of his attorneys was Vincent Torino, a fixer who defended organized crime figures. Daniel warned to watch my back. Brooke begged us to flee town together. I told her there was no us and that predators are only dangerous when they hunt the weak. "If you think you're stronger than him," I said, "I'm smarter and better connected." As if on cue, Sloan pulled into the drive in a composed prosecutorial fury, greeted Brooke with icy politeness, and took me aside to show a text Garrett had sent threatening me, a threat so brazen it gave probable cause for a restraining order. Her smile was thin. Men like Garrett only understood power. That night a brick smashed my kitchen window with a message. "Drop the investigation or next time it won't be a window." I called police and Sloan. She arrived with private security. The attack only tightened the case. Fingerprints, threats, escalation. Daniel phoned early, turn on the news, and federal agents were raiding Whitfield luxury properties. The cheer read, "FBI raids luxury real estate firm in money laundering investigation." Watching Garrett's world implode on television was a savage satisfaction, but also the most dangerous moment. A cornered man with nothing left to lose. Brooke called frantic. "He's been saying crazy things, blaming you." "I'm scared." By afternoon, Sloan had one emergency asset freezes. Judges froze accounts, properties, cars. Garrett was frozen out financially. Later that evening, leaving my office, the lights flicked and the elevator opened to reveal Garrett himself, disheveled, wild-eyed, claiming he had compromised files that implicated judges, senators, and business leaders and that he could destroy anyone unless I recanted. He gave me an hour to call a press conference and retract, or he'd dump documents that would burn half the city. I called Sloan and we decided to call his bluff. Within an hour, the media erupted with a massive document dump that included my name. Then Sloan texted, "FBI arrested him at O'Hare trying to flee to Costa Rica." News vans swarmed my house while reporters parsed money laundering, organized crime links, and illicit payments. Sloan stayed calm and focused on next steps. "Any regrets?" Sloan said quietly. Garrett was a predator who thought money made him untouchable, and while the collateral damage was regrettable, the alternative was to let him continue preying on people. Brooke called one last time, apologizing. I told her the consequences would be dealt with, by all of us. My marriage was finished, my career scarred by association, my name now tied to Chicago's largest recent corruption scandal. Yet I had achieved my aim. Garrett Whitfield was exposed and dismantled, his victims finally visible. The operation had worked exactly as intended. Cold, efficient, destructive. And while we were in the blast radius, that was the price of bringing a predator down. The perfect plan had succeeded, leaving ruin in its wake, a strange, hollow victory that